Last year, Kubo and the Two Strings was one of my most anticipated films, so I was jazzed when it came out. While I had some issues with it, it was still one of my favorite films of the year. I was even going to do a same-day review of it, but then something happened. It bombed at the box office. Once that happened, I decided to examine why that happened and why the movie-going public loves CGI films but not stop motion. But before I get into that, I'll do a quickish review on it right now. First, the plot. Kubo and the Two Strings tells the tale of Kubo who, after losing his mother, goes on a hero's journey to find magical armor in order to defeat the Moon King. Pros and cons. The acting and characters. It was good. If you put good actors in an animated film, they tend to be at least okay. Usually. They were able to provide the right emotion in each scene. They didn't appear stilted in their readings. The best performance was Art as Kubo. If he came off as too bratty, perfect, or whiny, or so on, then the film would have died since Kubo is pushing this film forward, as well as the story. The character interactions were all believable and I understood each character's motivations. Even the Moon King. Being that old and powerful and immoral, yeah, your perspective of the outside world will be different. The story and writing. It was a good story with funny, exciting, emotional, and scary scenes. Also, it had really emotional moments like when the mother protected Kubo at the start of the film and her sacrifice at the end of the first act. Another good point was the stories that Kubo told everyone. They were very vivid and imaginative, just as a child's imagination would be, and they were very involved. Also, the film was paced really well, so I wasn't ever bored. I also noticed that the storytelling was really lean. The chief reason I believe that is because the main cast is really small. Only 6 chief characters, or 3 if you're really being picky. This makes the story more intimate, even though it's on a very grand scale. In most animated films CGI, the main cast will be about 5 or 6 and then you have about the same amount of secondary characters. At that point, things start to get cluttered. It takes a 90-minute to 100-minute film and makes it feel like it's being filled with filler. Another thing I liked about the film was the climax and aftermath. The villain is defeated, but how he's dealt with afterwards is actually pretty ingenious. The writers create an interesting world with a mythology that I'm interested in and I want to see more of. The film does have dark moments, but I don't think that's a good enough reason not for a child to see this. To quote or paraphrase Don Bluth, kids can handle anything as long as there's a happy ending. Yes, some kids can't handle some dark stuff in kids' films, but it should be the parents' place to know what their kids can handle. Think about every great children's film. I bet at least 98.599% of them have dark moments in them. Kids are more sophisticated than adults give them credit for. Children like to have their entertainment challenge them sometimes. It forces them to think, to have more different types of experiences and become more creative in their life later on. On a side note, I did find it odd that Grace Randolph said one of the reasons she didn't like the film was the fatalism in it. What? It's a story about parents sacrificing for the child, as any good parent would do, and the child working through adversity in order to achieve their goal. Confounding. If you really want to see an example of fatalism, then read or watch the Fujiyama Gangsta Paradise arc from Black Lagoon. The character of Yukio Washishame exemplifies that term. This film does not. The animation and design. The animation was rich and colorful. Even the night scenes, the colors just pop. The character designs were good and the Japanese fable world design was expertly done. Also, not all of this was stop motion animation. There's a good amount of CGI in it too. I say it's about 70, 80, 30, 20 stop motion to CGI split. The film had a perfect marriage of both CG and stop motion. One problem stop motion films have had in the past was animating water. Well, this solves that issue. One of the most impressive aspects is how deep they go into Japanese culture and origami. This gave simple scenes like the town square scene or Kubo with his mother or in the battles an interesting flair. I haven't seen paper used this creatively since Read or Die. The way the world looks and what supernatural events that occur in it makes me interested in seeing more stories that take place in this particular world. It doesn't even have to be more adventuring following Kubo, even though a follow-up story with him with his grandfather on a trip would be good too. The soundtrack and score was awesome. This is one of my favorite soundtracks and scores of the year, up there with JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, Daime's Unbreakable. Just listening to each song it just immediately takes me back to the scene in the film where the piece was played. The music provides its own exposition, just like any score should. And now the cons. The acting. While the acting is good for the most part, this is where I believe experienced, good professional voice actors would have done better. I know one excuse people use in the industry is that one, voice acting is easy. It's not. You're acting with your voice. It's not easy. And two, you need to have well-known stars in order to promote the film. Actually, you don't. And do you or anyone else remember the stars that did voices in any of the films this year or the last 2 to 5 years? You probably only remember 1 to 2 tops. Also, voice actors are some of the most interesting people out there. One reason is they usually have different jobs in the industry, as well as the fact that about 99.99% of them have acted in live action as well. Well, I mean, live action actors haven't done a lot of voiceover work themselves, and they don't do it well because of that. Well, anyway, a good or great voice actor is capable of altering their voice to sound like many different characters. This main cast isn't able to do that. The chief offender is Charlize Theron. She does 2 different characters, and once you realize that, a major plot point is then spoiled. It doesn't help the fact that she doesn't do enough to make each character sound different. I believe the filmmakers tried to disguise this by having the mom not talk as much, but yeah, it's really easy to put it together. The story. There are times in the film where certain story points are cliche and when you can predict them coming from a mile away. An example would be the identity of Monkey. Once that's revealed, I was thinking, oh no, please, 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 I know who Bill is, please don't be that. Don't do that. They did that. Also, while Kubo's quest was to find all of the armor and then battle the Moon King, the audience is gonna know that Kubo isn't that type of fighter, and odds are he's gonna defeat him using, well, the 2 strings. I do, however, recommend this. I recommend this film strongly. Despite its issues, it's one of the best films I've seen last year, animated or not. Also, while certain story aspects were simplified for children to understand, I still feel the film is sophisticated enough for adults to enjoy on their own. And now, why does the movie-going public hate stop-motion animated films? The first stop-motion film I remember in my lifetime as being a financial success was A Nightmare Before Christmas. It made $88 million on an $18 million budget, about the same amount that The Little Mermaid made a few years prior. Now, the next successful stop-motion animated film wouldn't come out until about a decade later. Oh, there were other stop-motion films, but they weren't as well received. The next stop-motion film that was a box office, at least in the United States, was Chicken Run, followed by Wallace and Gromit. Actually, it might have been the other way around. But anyway, since there have been about an average of 1 stop-motion film released about every other year, they haven't been very successful. And the reason is simple. The movie-going public just doesn't like stop-motion animated films, and they never have. I don't see people online, or in life for that matter, asking why the disinterest in this form of animation. Part of the blame, I believe, goes to Tim Burton's A Nightmare Before Christmas. Even though there are very few animation studios that do stop-motion, the stop-motion films that do come out have had the same or similar look to them, just as most CGI films have the same look to them now. It had a creepy aesthetic that Nightmare had. If a film goer wanted to see a different film, well, you're not going to get that, and you're probably going to be pushed away from that style of animation. I mean, look at Kubo. It's strongly influenced by Japanese history and fables, and yet it did terrible in Japan and Asia. So yeah, even the Japanese don't like stop-motion animation. Don't believe me? Look at Corpse Bride, James and the Giant Peach, and every single Leica film. Their look might be just a bit too creepy for the mass audience. Another reason was something I didn't consider until I watched a video from fellow YouTuber Fam Strider. His issue with most stop-motion films is the uncanny valley of it all. Unlike CGI, which is noticeably not real and overly cartoony, there is a sense of false realness to puppetry. People can find it really off-putting. Also, in CGI films, characters tend to move in an over-exaggerated way, which I personally find annoying, but hey, people seem to like it. That's not really the case in stop motion because it's more time intensive, the characters' movements feel more realistic and structured, and when you factor in the look of the characters and the world that the stories tend to take place, tend to be a bit darker than the CGI films, yeah, there isn't going to be a really big mass appeal for this type of animation. So what can be done? perhaps a compromise. Filmgoers tend to be stuck in their ways and aren't going to willingly try anything new, so there needs to be some stop-motion anime films where the characters' designs borrow more from the 2D and CG anime films. First in look and then in ways they tell the stories. Yes, dumb it down a bit. Then once the audience gets used to this type of animation, branch it off and try different other styles. Will this happen? Probably not. Only a handful of major animation studios do stop motion, and one of them, Aardman, does claymation, and their look has a more whimsical British flavor to it that they've done over 20 years, so it's gotta fall to Laika. Thing is, with the failures of every single one of their films, odds are they're gonna be shutting their doors in the near future. Gee, thanks a lot, America. Oy. Well, whether or not you agree with me or if you like this video, please comment below and tell me what you think. And if you found this interesting, then please share, subscribe to the channel, and comment below and click like. Until next time, read more comic books from around the world and watch more 2D and stop motion animation. Venture on.